From the edge of the galaxy, we observed a tapestry of stars, a canvas scarred by the echoes of wars older than our oldest archives. Light years stretched between us and the remnants of countless empires, drifting like tombstones in the void. Entire civilizations had risen, glittering with ambition, only to collapse into silence. I have watched fleets crumble, planets burn, and the proud arrogance of species swallowed by their own overconfidence. The patterns were known, predictable, and, until now, monotonous. Then came the anomaly. Humans. Small, fragile, unremarkable to any casual eye, yet their presence radiated across the void like a shockwave. At first, we dismissed them as insignificant, a minor ripple among the galactic currents of war. But even in these initial observations, something unquantifiable shimmered in their motions. Their vessels, scouting crafts that looked almost rudimentary beside our dreadnoughts, moved with a grace that defied our sensors. They darted between asteroid belts and derelict warships, twisting and weaving as though the void itself obeyed their will. I have cataloged the movements of tens of thousands of fleets across millennia, and yet no algorithm, no projection, could anticipate the cadence of their maneuvers. Our first reports filtered through the observation decks. Scouts destroyed, or so we thought, only to reappear in impossible positions, launching attacks from angles that should have been blocked. Our tacticians murmured in disbelief. Impossible, they said. They are not programmed, they adapt. And indeed, each encounter showed them observing, improvising, and responding with uncanny intelligence. It was not the ferocity of their attack that unsettled us. It was the calm, deliberate calculation behind it. I watched as one lone human vessel skated through a nebula, weaving among the wreckage of our bombarded outposts. Sensors registered no conventional shields, no overwhelming weaponry, yet it emerged intact, unscathed, and its trajectory struck a previously hidden weak point in our patrol formation. The destruction that followed was meticulous, almost artful. There was no panic, no brute force, only a precision that shredded centuries of accumulated strategy. A whisper of fear began to permeate our command decks. Even the oldest of our strategists, whose memories stretched across the rise and fall of empires, began to tremble. "Are they unanticipated?" they asked, their voices trembling through our comms. "Mere creatures, small and new? Or some force that transcends the rules of combat as we understand them?" We cataloged their every movement, every tactic, every deviation from expectation, yet the more we studied them, the more inscrutable they became. They were like a virus in our calculations, adapting faster than we could predict, evolving in real time. There was something else, their audacity. Even their hesitance carried a weight we could not measure. The humans did not announce their presence with the fire of 1,000 weapons. They whispered it, leaving a tremor in their wake, subtle yet undeniable, and it spread. Across the command networks, in the quiet corridors of warships, in the eyes of our young cadets, unease blossomed. We began to sense not just a new player in the galactic theater, but a force that challenged the very assumptions that had governed warfare for millennia. In observation chambers, I saw officers staring into empty space, muttering in languages ancient as stars. They spoke of resilience, of a will that refused to bow even when the universe seemed stacked against it. Calculations that had taken centuries to perfect now faltered, undone by unpredictable improvisation. And still, the humans appeared unremarkable, vulnerable, fragile, and wholly underestimated. I considered their psychology, a concept difficult for my kind to grasp. They laughed, they paused to observe, they made mistakes, but then they learned. They combined improvisation with instinct, foresight with daring, unpredictability with coordination. I saw crews in vessels barely larger than our escape shuttles performed synchronized maneuvers that no algorithm could model, and in doing so, they disarmed fear itself. Even our most battle-hardened admirals began to whisper among themselves, their voices tinged with awe, dread, and something akin to reverence. Hours passed. Signals pulsed faintly across light years as fleets moved and clashed. We cataloged each encounter meticulously, yet each report carried a kernel of disbelief. How could a species so small, so new, wield such command over chaos? We, who had mastered the art of war, were left scrambling in their wake. And all the while, the humans moved with quiet determination, leaving us guessing, learning, and, most disturbingly, afraid. I felt the tremor even within my own perception. It was a subtle shift in the void, a resonance not from energy or mass, but from the will of a species that refused to conform to known patterns. A faint shiver ran through the sensors. The humans had arrived, and even in these earliest tentative moves, they carried the inevitability of something larger, something unstoppable. And yet, we did not yet understand the scope of what they were capable of. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The darkness of the void stretched endlessly before us, broken only by the faint glimmers of distant stars and the drifting remnants of centuries-old battles. And then, without warning, the anomaly made itself known. At first, it was almost imperceptible, a ripple in the void, a pattern our sensors could barely register, a scatter of lights that seemed insignificant, almost laughable compared to the sprawling fleets we had come to trust. But within minutes, the battlefield itself shifted, and the small lights became the heralds of chaos. Human fleets emerged like shadows coalescing into substance, moving in formations that defied conventional understanding. At first glance, they seemed fragile, vulnerable, and untested. But the precision of their movements quickly stripped away any illusion of insignificance. Each vessel executed maneuvers that tore apart our centuries-honed strategies. Barrages that should have decimated them were dodged with fluid grace. Attacks that seemed carefully calculated to overwhelm were disrupted with unpredictability that rendered our algorithms obsolete. From my observation post, I felt an unease ripple through me, something between terror and admiration. How could beings so small, so unassuming, wield such command over destruction? The humans did not roar through the battlefield. They did not issue proclamations or signals of dominance. They moved silently, with cold efficiency, striking at our formations with timing that suggested not just calculation, but instinct. Even our most veteran commanders, whose experience spanned decades, faltered under the weight of this new variable. Strategies that had crushed rivals across the galaxy were rendered meaningless in mere moments. Their weapons were primitive, certainly, by our standards, yet they struck with surgical precision. I observed the first volleys, the flashes of light against the hulls of our warships, and noted the devastating effect of even small, seemingly insignificant strikes. Sensors that had mapped thousands of attacks failed to predict their targets. Algorithms that calculated the most efficient defense were repeatedly outmaneuvered. And yet, there was a rhythm, an order, in what seemed to us chaotic improvisation. The humans did not waste energy on theatrics. There were no flares, no broadcasted taunts, no posturing. Their efficiency was absolute. Where other species might announce their arrival with firepower and noise, humans arrived like a quiet storm, and the storm was already upon us before we realized it. Every maneuver was precise, every decision exact, and every adaptation instantaneous. They reshaped the battlefield with an unerring awareness of not only their surroundings, but of the minds and calculations of their opponents. From my vantage point, I watched as one small human vessel darted through the wreckage of a destroyed cruiser, weaving between debris fields our own navigation systems had deemed impassable. It struck at our supply lines, severing communications and isolating entire fleets, all without apparent hesitation. It was as if the void itself obeyed their will, bending around their movements while obstructing ours. The precision was terrifying, the audacity breathtaking. Even those among us long accustomed to cosmic warfare could not comprehend the scale of their mastery. I could feel the tremor of fear ripple across our fleets. Ships that had once projected dominance now trembled under the pressure of an opponent that refused to play by the known rules. Orders shouted across command decks fell flat. Strategies devised over decades were invalidated in seconds, and a sense of uncertainty began to creep into every corner of the war theater. Humans were not just fighting, they were rewriting the very definition of combat. Their coordination was unlike anything we had ever encountered. A small fleet would split, only to converge moments later on an unexpected target. One group would feint a retreat, drawing our forces into traps we had not anticipated. Another would board derelict ships mid-battle, commandeering our own weapons to turn against their creators. It was brilliance in its simplest form, terrifying precisely because it defied expectation. No pattern, no calculation, no experienced war mind could fully account for their ingenuity. And yet, even as awe gripped me, I realized this was only the beginning. For every ship that fell, every fleet disrupted, there was no exultation on the human's part. There was only movement, precision, adaptation. It was not enough to destroy. They imposed their will, reshaping the battlefield, and leaving in their wake a silence that amplified the fear of all who observed. Veteran commanders whispered among themselves, their confidence crumbling. Decades of experience meant nothing when confronted with something so extraordinary. Humans were small, fragile, untested, but they wielded chaos with mastery. They transformed vulnerability into strength, unpredictability into power, improvisation into strategy. And in doing so, they became something more than warriors. They became inevitability incarnate. The first hour passed in disbelief. Observers cataloged every maneuver, every strike, every anomaly. Calculations failed, algorithms sputtered, and predictions dissolved into irrelevance. The humans did not conform to our understanding of war. They transcended it. And I, alien witness, felt the first true tremor of fear, not because of what they had done, but because of what they could do. By the time the second hour unfolded, fleets that had been confident, invincible, and battle-hardened were staggering. Strategic formations dissolved under the pressure of human ingenuity. And I knew with certainty that we had underestimated them, that our centuries of calculated dominance were now at the mercy of something we could not predict, could not contain, and might never understand. Even now, I can still feel the awe, the mixture of terror and admiration that humans inspire in every observer. Small, silent, seemingly fragile, they are a storm that arrives quietly, yet reshapes everything in its path. We had thought ourselves invincible. We were wrong. And in the midst of this revelation, a single, undeniable truth became clear. The humans were not just participants in the war. They were a force unto themselves, and the battlefield would never be the same. The void itself seemed to tremble as hours stretched into the relentless grind of battle. From our distant observation decks, we watched as fleets that had once been considered invincible began to fracture under an assault that defied reason. Our warships, symbols of centuries of mastery, shattered in ways we could not predict. Explosions rippled silently across the darkness, leaving only drifting debris and burning metal, silent monuments to human audacity. It began with small incursions, almost imperceptible, a human strike team intercepting an isolated cruiser, their ship weaving through turrets with impossible precision. At first, we believed it a fluke, a lucky shot in the chaos of war, but the anomaly persisted. Every mistake they made was fleeting, almost deliberate. They learned instantly, turning failures into advantage. Patterns emerged, not ours, not predictable, patterns of improvisation, cunning, and ruthless efficiency. They struck at weak points we had long ignored, exploiting blind spots our scanners had deemed inconsequential. And each strike, each maneuver, sent ripples of doubt across our command structures. I remember the first time I saw them board one of our derelict capital ships mid-battle. From my observation post, it appeared surreal, human silhouettes moving through corridors abandoned in confusion, overriding controls, seizing command from our own officers. The very machines we had designed to defend us turned against our fleets, as if acknowledging a new authority. Even the veterans, seasoned beings who had survived centuries of conflict, could not comprehend the audacity. Our communications buzzed with panic, officers shouting orders that could not be executed, systems rerouted by unseen hands, and the relentless advance of those small, determined humans. There was a rhythm to their chaos, a harmony in the apparent randomness. Each human action, though improvised, fit into a pattern of devastating efficiency. We cataloged their movements, yet no algorithm could anticipate the next strike. We tried to predict their trajectories, their strategies, their choices, but every projection failed, undone by the sheer unpredictability of their instinctive brilliance. And as we recalculated, another fleet would fall, another stronghold would shatter, and the humans would advance, relentless, unyielding. From the decks of our command ships, the cries of our soldiers echoed faintly through the void. Some spoke of fear, others of disbelief, many of admiration tinged with horror. I observed in silence, recording every detail, understanding that this was no ordinary victory or defeat. It was something new, something the galaxy had never seen, a species rewriting the rules of engagement while the rest of us still clung to centuries-old doctrines. We saw them adapt mid-combat in ways our best strategists had never conceived. A human vessel, cornered in a narrow asteroid field, used the terrain not as an obstacle, but as a weapon.
Debris became cover, gravity wells became traps, and in moments, what should have been certain destruction transformed into decisive advantage. They exploited our own assumptions against us, turning overwhelming firepower into vulnerability. The most terrifying moments came when we watched entire formations collapse almost silently. Our dreadnoughts, massive vessels that had crushed countless enemies, were incapacitated in minutes. Shields failed where we believed them impenetrable, weapons misfired under human manipulation. Even our elite squadrons, trained over decades, veterans of countless engagements, could not withstand the ingenuity of these fragile creatures. And in their wake, silence spread, a stillness punctuated only by drifting wreckage and the faint signals of those too late to escape. I do not exaggerate when I say the galaxy's most feared powers were undone not by overwhelming force, but by the raw unpredictability of humans. They moved without hesitation, without arrogance, yet with a confidence that unsettled even the oldest among us. We observed humans boarding ships, turning our own machines against our fleets, improvising strategies on the fly, and executing maneuvers that seemed to mock the centuries of experience we had accumulated. Every encounter left a mark, not just on the battlefield, but on the minds of those who survived. Fear, awe, and a reluctant reverence intertwined in our ranks. And yet, even amidst the chaos and destruction, they did not exult. There was no fanfare, no proclamation of victory. They acted and they advanced as though each action were simply a step towards something inevitable. A species of such audacity, such ingenuity, had never before emerged in the galaxy. The humans did not fight as we expected. They fought as if the rules themselves were negotiable, bending and reshaping them with every engagement. From my post, I could see entire fleets reduced to fragments, their crews fleeing or silenced. Yet the humans pressed on, undeterred, leaving destruction not as an end, but as evidence of their adaptability. Even when our most cunning officers devised new strategies, humans would anticipate, improvise, and counter, leaving our calculations obsolete before they were even completed. The audacity of their resilience was as frightening as their success. And as I watched, a horrifying clarity settled over me. These were not simply warriors. They were agents of a new order, rewriting the laws of warfare and survival in ways our ancient minds could barely comprehend. They exploited our weaknesses, discovered our blind spots, and redefined what it meant to dominate a battlefield. The galaxy's greatest powers, long thought unassailable, were unraveling in moments at the hands of beings we had underestimated for too long. I felt the tremor of inevitability. The human's rise was not a series of lucky strikes or flukes of fortune. It was a force, a torrent, and it was far from finished.
Across the void, silence fell over fleets that had once roared with certainty, replaced by whispers of disbelief and awe. Those who survived the initial assaults began to mutter of legends reborn, of prophecies unspoken. And all of us, observers and participants alike, realized that the turning point had arrived. Not slowly, not gradually, but with the sudden, undeniable momentum of human will. The stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as if the galaxy watched, holding its breath for the next impossible act. And in that stillness, I understood. The humans would not just fight, they would redefine the war entirely. The void had never felt so heavy. Even the stars seemed dimmer, their light trembling against the darkness, as if the cosmos itself sensed what was coming. From our observation platforms, we saw it unfold, the crescendo of a conflict that had spanned eons, now collapsing in the span of hours. Entire strategies, honed over millennia, disintegrated under the relentless ingenuity of the humans. Their movements were precise, terrifying, and yet almost serene, a deadly ballet performed with an instinctive mastery that no algorithm could model, no tactician could predict. Our fleets, once symbols of unassailable dominance, were being reduced to fragments. Weapons misfired, shields faltered, and entire sectors went silent, not in triumph, but in annihilation. Ships that had survived countless wars were now drifting husks, their crews either destroyed or rendered helpless by maneuvers so audacious, so brilliant, that even our most seasoned admirals could not comprehend them. And yet, amid this devastation, the humans moved with calm precision, orchestrating the end of a war that had defined civilizations for generations. I witnessed our flagship, centuries of power incarnate, erupt in flames under their assault. Its command tower, a gleaming testament to hubris and technological achievement, disintegrated in a single, flawless strike. Smoke and fire painted the void, a silent monument to our arrogance. Our finest vessels, our most cunning strategies, all proved inadequate. The humans did not simply attack, they dismantled, they redefined, they executed a plan that had no precedent in the galaxy. It was as if the very rules of war bent to their will, reshaping themselves to the rhythm of human ingenuity. From our distant observation decks, we could hear, or imagine, the screams, the frantic commands, the last desperate attempts to salvage what remained. Yet in the midst of chaos, awe spread like wildfire among our ranks. Even the most battle-hardened veterans, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires, whispered of reverence and fear. What were these beings? Fragile, soft, untested, yet their will radiate a force that none could resist. They had become the apex, not through numbers, not through overwhelming technology, but through a synthesis of courage, adaptability, and relentless determination.
Human ships darted through firestorms as though the void were their playground. Boarding parties seized vessels mid-combat, redirecting weapons to obliterate fleets that had once been invincible. Every strike was intentional, every maneuver perfectly calculated, yet executed with an improvisational flair that left us, masters of war, paralyzed. Our sensor grids, designed to anticipate and counter threats, registered their presence only as fleeting anomalies before they struck with precision and vanished again. It was chaos to us, but order to them, a system of survival and dominance written in motion and instinct. I could see the galaxy itself holding its breath. Planets went dark, outposts fell silent, and communications across sectors sputtered into static. It was a silence born not of peace, but of absolute, unrelenting conquest. The humans did not celebrate. There was no fanfare, no cries of victory. They moved as if executing a single inevitable truth. The war would end, and they would shape the future that followed. The destruction was a tool, a language, a testament to their unparalleled resilience and ingenuity. Even our most cunning admirals, those who had survived centuries of interstellar war, found themselves paralyzed, incapable of countering the fluid, adaptive tactics the humans employed. Every move we attempted to regain advantage was anticipated and neutralized. Entire formations dissolved in moments, their firepower redirected or rendered useless by the humans' uncanny understanding of both strategy and human instinct. What had once been our confidence now seemed like fragile arrogance, easily shattered by beings we had long dismissed. And yet, even in this devastation, awe persisted. Among the survivors, whispers spread, soft, reverent, tinged with fear. "They are not merely warriors," one of our oldest strategists murmured. The humans had rewritten the rules of conflict, not through technology alone, but through the singular force of their will. Their audacity was matched only by their efficiency, their adaptability by their precision, their courage by their relentless refusal to yield. From my observation post, I cataloged their every movement, every strike, every maneuver, each one a revelation. The humans were no longer merely participants in the Galactic War. They had become arbiters of its conclusion. The collapse of our fleets, the destruction of our bastions, the obliteration of entire sectors, all spoke to a power that was not measured in weapons or numbers, but in something far more profound: determination, ingenuity, and the audacious brilliance of a species that refused to conform to expectation. I saw ships fall into gravity wells they had once controlled, only to be redirected mid-fall by humans using tactics that made no sense to our algorithms, yet were devastating in execution. I saw weapons turned against their creators, entire squadrons neutralized before they could fire.
I saw the emblem of centuries of dominance, our most revered command stations, erupt in fire and silence. And in each instance, a quiet truth emerged. The humans did not merely survive the war, they commanded it. Fear and admiration entwined within me, a knot I could not untangle. For eons, my species had regarded mastery over war as the pinnacle of achievement. Yet here were beings we had dismissed, fragile and small, who had shattered our perception of supremacy. Our dread grew not from their strength, but from their singular, unyielding will, a force that reshaped reality around them. And then it was over. The war ended not with a final battle or a dramatic surrender, but with an almost imperceptible silence. Fleets ceased movement, weapons fell silent, outposts went dark. The galaxy, long scarred by conflict, paused. In that pause, a realization settled over every observer. Humanity had not merely fought, they had concluded the war, reshaped the cosmos, and inscribed their mark upon existence itself. Even from the farthest observation decks, I could feel it, the weight of inevitability. Humanity had arrived, and in the span of hours, they had rewritten eons of galactic history. They were fragile, yes, yet unyielding, vulnerable, yet terrifyingly capable. And as we watched the smoldering remnants of our fleets, we understood a truth that would echo for millennia. Humans were not just another species. They were the apex of survival, adaptability, and willpower, a force that even the oldest civilizations could scarcely comprehend. The stars themselves seemed to shimmer in acknowledgement, a silent testament to the rise of a species that would define the future. And in that moment, I knew, with a clarity that pierced every sensor and synapse, the galaxy had changed forever.